And we've got our slideshow and everything, and it's right at 2 o'clock. So I like punctuality. This is the Data Dictionary Workgroup, and we are going to do some actual workgroup meeting business. So those of you who are new, you'll get to see a little bit of what those meetings are like. The majority are monthly. I think it's a Thursday at noon Eastern. We've got the specific dates out there posted. You really want to get in and take a look at the dates of the actual meetings in advance. If you're going to mark your calendar, we'd love to have as much participation as possible. The groups are quite large on the calls, but I would comment there's plenty of room for people to chime in and to comment on the topics that we have, including today. But you will see that one of the ground rules is that you need to get that post into Confluence. All right, and we'll talk about how to do that a little bit and make sure you're comfortable with it and where to get assistance with that. Oh my God. All right, I need to go back and do the antitrust. Okay, RESO strives to increase competition in the marketplace and will not be a forum for anti-competitive conduct. The RESO antitrust policy governs the activities of RESO and its members, including this meeting. Please consult RESO's counsel if you have any questions about the policy. I'm going to stay here long enough to get my email and my phone number. I don't really like hot Rob. And Kevin, you're not off the hook either. I'm sure I know what's coming next. All right, and if you need the email or phone number later, you can just hit me up. Yep, we got Hot Kevin. So you can grab his info there. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few different things here. The roadmap for RESO is kind of a special call out. We do a lot of the same thing. Year in and year out, and we've had some changes in the patterns on how we do things for those of you who go back. And we're going to be reestablishing some of those patterns and really kind of making clear what our goals for the year is something that I wanted to emphasize and will continue to do at least in the spring. Right, and so we'll talk about participation using the dictionary. We'll roll into some of the stuff relevant to that roadmap around how we're executing things, and then roll right into some regular agenda items, thus the antitrust policy being read, which will include an update from subgroups. All right, so I had written sort of a mission statement, but I preferred to just kind of do it in this format so it'd be a little bit more clear to you. I think the first thing here is making sure everybody's clear and understands what it really means when we say we're going to pivot from consensus to convention. So consensus was, for those of you who were part of the groups back in the day when we'd huddle in my office in December, we'd have, dozen, maybe 20 MLSs represented. We'd have them all mapped up at spreadsheets. We'd get all the common names down a column, right, and compare it to maybe stuff we already had in the dictionary, and we would just chug through it for like a day and a half, right? And we get hundreds of decisions made. And it was really about consensus. And then, I'd try to apply some convention. We call it like RESO dictionaryifying things, where we'd work on convention. And there was a good amount of convention being done, a lot of discussions around standard data types and lengths, which it's an important thing to distinguish when you're looking at the dictionary. For the tech folk, you might look at it and say, well, this isn't a data type. You're right, it's a business rule. So that's an important thing to remember. So when you see like suggested maximum length, you can say, probably coming in the door, this is the most I'm going to get, right? So if we're talking about like a string length. Now, if you're talking about like a number length, you got a full integer and it's only 2 characters, you're going to be fine, right? So you just need to put that translation when you're looking at it for those of you who aren't aware of that fact. And so, give you an example of consensus, the city field. City field in MLSs, in listings, not MLSs, but in listings, is an enumeration, is a commonly searched field. The city field in roster is a string field, because it tends to be people from outside of the MLS boundaries that used to be a lot more clearly defined. They were from all over, and you never searched by them, so why maintain that bigger list? I think that's the background as to why they were that way, but it was the consensus of the MLS systems. That's kind of a problem for people who are data consumers who, when they go to city, and it's different in different places, right? So those kinds of things. We're going to talk about the version cadence. This is the piece that I was talking about with regards to how the dictionary had a certain pace of versions, and then that changed for a while, right? 2.0 has got a lot of impact to it because it's got almost 3 years of dictionary workgroup things being added to it, including an enhancement in certification. That's all changing. And then we'll go over some of the projects and then roll into the regular agenda. But I wanted to call these projects out because kind of in conversation through the organization, involvement with the board, internally, RESO staff, they have their mission, vision, right? They have their roadmaps, I should say, is the important part. These are in alignment with those things. So we should, it's bringing us all together. We have other subgroups. We have other things that will get done. But we definitely wanted to make sure we tackled these because of, one, I think the reach that they have, a lot to do with international, other industries like commercial, right, as opposed to residential, and so on. Okay, the update cadence. I hate this diagram. It looked terrible. I threw it into DALL-E, ChatGPT's image processor, and it kept throwing me back just as, I should have thrown one on here. You guys would have loved it. It was embellishing and having a great time with it, kept turning it into a cartoon. So anyway, Jason said this looked fine, and so we just went with it. The good part here is you can see, here we are at the spring conference, and right about now, right, and leading into this, the ratification of 2.0 has been happening, right? And you can expect in the future, around the spring conference, you'll have ratification. And when we get around to the fall conference, you can see that we'll be closing the version, right? So if you walk through these, we're at a point where new Confluence posts going in are 2.1, right? And we have workgroup meetings, and they go into the draft, right? And at that point, once we got in the draft, that's where forward compatibility starts to become a thing, right? That's where you start thinking about how is this going to impact me, and you can sort of spread your planning out. You can still roll things out all at once, but it gives you a little bit of reliance on what's going on. Caution though, if you roll out draft things, draft is pretty volatile. It doesn't tend to change, but it's real easy to change. It won't have to wait for another version because it's still the draft. So if you're thinking, I'm going to go ahead and roll this out now, just know that you're taking that risk. I've taken the risk in a couple times because it was a business decision. There was good demand to do it, and it made sense. So by the time we're meeting again, and probably at that meeting, we will vote to close, and 2.1 will be closed, right? Just like 2.0 is closed now. And from there, everything new will go into 2.2, or we might decide to use another number, but new items will go in there, and we will start going into that review period. Certification will be getting prepped, right? Comments, all those sorts of things. So can change still happen? Yeah, but that's more of getting that errata type stuff tackled before we ratify. By the time we ratify, we want to make sure that it's clean and tight, right? And you tend to have like things less impactful, like a definition adjustment. That's going to be a lot more common in the second phase. We'd really hope that once we close out, we don't like add a field, right? Or change the name of an enumeration. Things like that should be very restricted to only urgent cases, right? And then by the time we get to ratification, if everybody's done their job, it'll be tight, clean, we won't have any errata, and the cycle repeats. Any questions on that? Any thoughts? Is once a year comfortable? Because we just spent several, but it was good reasons. Building the engine that we have today is huge, and I think a lot of you see that. And so we just kept dictionary open until that was complete, but now we're going to go back to the 1 year cycle. Any questions? All right. All right, change control. If it isn't posted, it isn't going to get done. It's super, super simple. You might have a work group. You might have an individual thought. If it isn't posted in the dictionary, it's your problem. And I hate to put it that way, but it is. Now, you've got all sorts of resources to help you. If you're a work group, Jason, right? He's more than happy. If you're an individual, email dd@reso.org. I'll have a page with that on there. There's a lot of help getting the posts done. But as far as the work group is concerned, if it's not posted 2 weeks in advance, we're not talking about it at the next meeting. And this is also subject to first in, first out. Prioritizations can take priorities, right? So if you have an emergency, a huge priority, make sure you're talking about it with folks, with Jason and I. That's kind of the scoop on getting it in there. I want to make sure that's super clear. And you should feel very free to making posts. If you feel you have any restriction, if you're uncomfortable in any way, make sure you talk to us. We need to break through that and get it to where you're getting your issues and your ideas and the things you want tackled up there. And then Confluence notifications. Be part of the group, get the notifications. This is the flip side. Now you're on the receiving side of change. You've got a system that cares, right? That has to be managed. Getting those notifications give you the chance that you have to step in and say, hey, I like this, or wait a minute, that's gonna break all these things. If you don't come forward and nobody knows, and it's already all the way to ratification, you're kind of too late, right? So you wanna make sure that you're in there. If you maybe occasionally have problems with email, then just go to the board and watch it. Whatever you need to do. If you've got a system that you're responsible for, be responsible for it. Workgroup votes. You can network beforehand. You definitely being at the meeting there to represent what you want is important. Sometimes we have folks who can't make it. Things happen. No problem. We can push it to the next meeting. The nice thing about having a one-year cycle is if you miss this meeting and you catch that one, you're probably not going to be any further or worse for the time. So keep that in mind. If you need time to research, look at what time you are in the year. You know, keep this cycle here in mind, right? But also don't save it as we start getting towards the close in the fall, because we might pile up. And we're not going to just suddenly have a 2-hour meeting, a 3-hour meeting, because everybody saves their stuff. So there's a little bit of balance to keep in mind there. And then with regards to the draft period, you know, I think for me, the most important thing is those things that I covered. You can take risks, right? You can get research done and planning done and not take risks. I would say that should be your minimum. And then again, by doing that planning and research, it'll give you a chance to come back during the draft and say there's an issue. And if you don't, then, well, it is what it is. And then closed, we're on to the next topic, comment period. Again, really limited at that point to serious errata, and we're done. So gave you a different view of that with some sentences on there. All right, up to this point, any questions? Sleepy? I stayed to, I'm sorry if the shrimp were a little low. I ate a lot of them. They were good. All right. So also under a roadmap and kind of the topic of change control is the policies and procedures we're putting together. You know, Jason and I have been working on building these up over time. It's been a lot of, you know, hey, Jason, keep your eye out for, like, if something comes out of my mouth and I say this is our policy, make sure you grab it, because there are an awful lot of things that a work group does that are habits, right? And getting those documented is one aspect that we're doing. We're also, another aspect of building up our policy and our procedures is observing, right? So we go back and we look and we see that this has an S on the end of it and it's a plural, and that one doesn't have an S and it's not, right? And it's like, you know, we actually never talked about that one. So now we've got in our guide to look at that specifically. taking a look maybe a little bit more, emphasizing data types, bringing those discussions out. Because the dictionary work group tends to focus a lot on the name of the field. So one of our policies is to bring these things out and to create steps to make sure that we're covering these things. I'm even having discussions with Joss about automatically testing some of these conventions so that we can have them pulled out for us in advance. And usually these things are when, it's a early draft and it's a small tweak to maintain convention. We've been doing a lot of that, but that's pretty important. And then, one of the things you'll see is we're going to talk about the balance of the technology and who our audience is here. So one thing that we were very much about, right, was consensus. Like I described those meetings, we all sit down, and it's like, yeah, most of us are doing this, let's do it, right, and move forward. But there was convention there. There was plenty of discussion. And this ratio is probably a little bit misrepresentative, but I want it to be clear that consensus was the priority. And we need to balance that. It's still based on consensus, but convention needs to have its place. We've got to pay attention to the consumers of the data, because we can go ahead and do our consensus and not pay attention to that. But if our goal is to really make this whole plug and play vision, which used to be the buzzword years ago, and I come from the 90s and I hated plug and play, it was a pain in the butt. But the reality is that's a concept that is, I think, quite important to be able to do if we want new technology and new innovation to flourish in our industry. We need to make it easier for them to get at it. And then our audience, we were MLSs, right? I told the story last night about how I brought a good friend of mine, a broker. He asked me if I want him to go to RESO, and I was like, yeah. And it was kind of like, look, everyone, a practitioner. This is what they look like. Because we were really a bunch of tech folks and brokers, agents, appraisers, the like. We're really not in the room so much. And we evolved on that front, and we're doing a lot better. But we're going to continue evolving on that front with regards to who our audience is from the standpoint of you seeing international. Okay, they've got the name MLS out there. They're quite different. They do things differently. We've got other organizations around property. We've got organizations around transactions. And the dictionary's been doing a lot of stuff on this front, but it's going to continue. And it's really, I think, ratio-wise for us to be healthy. It needs to look more like this, right? MLS is our roots, but there's a whole world of property-related data out there. And the more we align with that world, the more all this stuff flows well. So does any of that scare you? Then you don't maintain your metadata, because it's going to suck. It is. It's going to be like a conversion, right? They suck. You change things, things break. This vendor didn't get that done. The more you prepare in advance, the less you fix after the fact. So get ready, right? Everybody's getting a good dose of 3 years of dictionary buildup, and now certification that stretches into the enumerations and covers a lot more than it used to, right? I think this is a good wake-up call for us. It's like, surprise, this is so much harder than bronze was, right? But it's going to have to continue if we're going to evolve. If we're going to be international and connect these things, it's going to be part of the equation. But we don't even have to go international to cause this. It's just going to be the norm of us embracing. And then maybe in 100 years, your grandkids who work at the MLS, because the MLS will still be around then, will be like so grateful because this won't be a problem for them. Okay. Also on our initiatives, I mentioned in our roadmap, you'll see that we've got like the Waterfront, right? And David helping out on that and running that is not diminished. That's one of those that we are bent on getting done this year. These are major initiatives that we've had going on, commercial building and rental. And we have MVPs that we are aligning with this year to complete by the close of 2.1 so that you see all of these coming in. So building is going to be related to property, right? But it's giving us a whole new resource and dimension around buildings. You can probably see in the future, post this MVP, maybe some enhancements. Maybe we start looking at floors, right? We already got a way that we handle units under multifamily. Well, maybe that's going to evolve to align better with how commercial is. Maybe it'll be separate. So, the MVP is the start. Commercial, I think we've got a really good basis for what we have going on, but it's a whole world that will be evolving on. But I think it's a good start, and I find it quite similar and maybe a little bit better than the dictionary started with residential, a little bit farther along, because it's got a lot more experience and existing stuff behind it. And then lastly, our roadmap will always include whatever you post. Okay, so how to participate. Does anybody have any issue with getting into Confluence? info@reso.org if you need your login. You want to make sure you're in there. If you don't know how to make sure that you're getting notifications off of anything, you can watch a post, you can watch the whole group, and get those into your inbox so that you know when there's changes going. Be forewarned. I watch quite a few things. I've got a folder set up that routes it all into that folder, because if I don't chase it like every week, after a couple weeks, I get a couple hundred things in there. But you can narrow that down to the stuff that matters to you. But it's definitely worth it. All right. Posting into the dictionary. Is everybody comfortable at this point? How many do we have that are new, that haven't participated in the work group yet? 2, 3. All right. Feel free to hit me up afterwards if you got any question. Jason is here as well. We just want to make sure you're comfortable. If you don't know, what's appropriate for a post or anything like that, just email dd@reso.org. I mean, it's really kind of straightforward. We've done our research. We have this. We don't see it in the dictionary. We'd like to see it added. It's a good example. Okay? Dictionary has this. It doesn't work in our area. We'd like it addressed. Those kind of things. You can just throw them right in there. We want to make sure everyone's comfortable, right? If you got an implementation issue, like, my vendor lets me put in a sales price that's less than is a negative number, right? There's not a whole lot we can do, but we can certainly bring that in and talk about best practices. We can definitely talk about those things of pain points. The dictionary work group, needs a little bit more, meat. Like, here's an actual thing we need to done in the dictionary. We might break into business rules. We already have a little bit. We did some work on calculations for days on market. So if you think the dictionary should, there's maybe another post. So I don't want to discourage you if it's not some convention that you see in there. Okay, so before we move on to regular agenda items, any discussion or questions? Usually agenda items get people stirred up, so hopefully we'll have some better participation. All right. So this one I think is pretty straightforward. Now, to be clear, we got a request for the back on market timestamp, right? And this would be an addition. The impact would be to you would be if, say, I have a return to market timestamp. Well, you're doing it, but you're not doing it the dictionary way. So if this gets voted in, that'll be a problem for you. And I also invite you to take a look at on-market date, right? Off-market date versus timestamp. Timestamps, you look in the dictionary, they're a date time. They got the business rule has a longer length, right? And they are a timestamp. Dates are just a date, and they've got a shorter length. Again, business rule intention, however you implement it is your thing, but notice how much more we have dates. Now, if you read definitions, and RESO doesn't certify this, dates tend to be something somebody puts in, and timestamps tend to be something that gets stamped by the system, right? But looking at this utilization, I would say a lot of people are populating the on-market date and the off-market date automatically, and they're not worried about timestamps, so they're using a date. So as we consider this, maybe we should consider the back on market date at the same time. Now, I feel this is a pretty straightforward topic. It's been posted long enough. We usually don't tackle super complex issues in this forum because it's much easier to have votes and rigorous discussion on the calls. But I feel this is a pretty friendly one for us to potentially tackle. So what we would need is somebody to make a motion and somebody to second it, and then that will open us up for a discussion to talk about what specifically we want to do, but your motion should say, I just want to add the timestamp, or I want to add both the timestamp and the date. We can amend that, but that would start us off, because my name is Robert, and those are the rules. Yes. Where did we get our second from? Oh, okay. And could you give us our name? Yeah. Hi, Katie. Katie Davenport, the Birdman. All right. Okay, so I'm going to take that paraphrase and turn it into a full sentence, if that's okay with you, Katie. So the motion is to add a status change. I'm sorry, I'll start again. The motion is to add a back on market timestamp and a back on market date field to property. They will follow the same date-time convention that we have that is pretty consistent across the dictionary. Yes?
I just had a question. If RESO is planning to go international, are we doing a format for how the date should be Monday versus years?
I'll go ahead and repeat that. If we can get folks to walk up to the mics, it might not be a bad thing because we do have people online. So the question is because we're going international, are we looking at other formats? Is that a good way of summarizing it? Okay. Right now, we don't have that in front of us. We've definitely got conventions out there to follow. I think that transport is a good place where you probably got a lot of guys that are just, yep, there's this one, that one. We can definitely bring those in. With how fields are tested, we test the field in its name. We see if there's content. We test enumerations. We'd also need to look at testing the content, right, to tackle that. I'm not opposed to that. We just sort of don't do that, but I think that's a worthy topic. We would want to get that in a post, right? Make sure it's got a couple weeks, and then bring it in and do it everywhere at once. Right? So for this, we're just going to follow the convention is my recommendation. Although if somebody wants us to not follow the current convention, I'll just warn you, we did that with the capital ID on fields versus camel case I, lowercase d, and it didn't matter which way we turned, we weren't going to be consistent. So we probably shouldn't get too caught up in that right now, but I think that would be a great post. And if you'd like to make it or email into DD, we generally need a member of the committee to kick us off on things. We can do it from the staff level, but it's better if the membership originates things. Cesar.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, what does adding this solve? Because when a listing does go back on market, the last major change type that's already in the resource, we'll say back on market. I'll have the timestamp with that. Then when it moves off market, if somebody wanted visibility on when it did, fall out of escrow or whatever, they have history. So, just trying to understand like what use case we're solving here and
why keep adding more flat stuff into a listing like we've been doing for a long time. It's a very good point.
Yeah.
I think my answer to that is just what I said. We have a lot of flat stuff in listings for a variety of reasons. I don't disagree with you at all. Any other thoughts with regards to that? Any other comments? Yes.
So I want to go actually specifically to that, to the usefulness of having both the date and the timestamp, because the timestamp's the one that's being asked about. having that, it's not about like the MLS major change type, because that's always the last thing to happen. It's about what happened right before that. So, like somebody put their listing on hold because the water heater exploded or something, but then somebody's banging on the door and like trying to like slide an offer in, and like, so there's rapid status changes happening. To be able to do any kind of analysis on there, like you have to start doing like weird queries in the history of the listings and things like that. So to just have like a couple of little indicators directly in the listing table that there even is something weird to go and look for is useful. So that flattened data, it's the indicator that you need to go and check another table instead of having to constantly check every single table for whatever you happen to be looking for. It's a lot easier to focus in on what you're doing. But then the date field, because correct me if I'm wrong, RESO doesn't, for all the talk about like you've got junk dates, it's a close date 10 years in the future or whatever, RESO has no limitations on the actual use of a date. Like any date field could be any date, right? I don't remember seeing anything.
And this addresses a point that was brought up earlier. Everything in the dictionary, sans a couple things required by transport, are extensible and omissible. You can essentially launch the dictionary with whatever fields transport says you have to have. And in my opinion, it's all about your business decision.
Well, right, and that's why, so like you could start to attach.
Let me kind of second what you're saying. Here's the main reason I see with this. I see this field out there. It exists. People have it on listings. Now, between timestamp and date, that's more of the convention than the consensus coming out. I think we should follow the convention, right? But that field is out there. I don't have a utilization number, and this is anecdotal, but I've seen it a lot, and I think we've got a good argument in favor of it here.
Well, and I think the date field would be a good one to have, because you could start building functionality and listings on that as a producer or as a consumer, like data consumer. Because if you could, like, depending on what that date was, whether it's in the past or even in the future, like you could start to schedule a listing to go back on market when the kid's birthday party ends, because you just didn't want to, so now in the listing you have a way to say like, hey, give us 24 hours and you can start doing your showings again. So it's not a block in the showing service, or if you're just having the owner schedule their own showings or whatever, you've got a way to communicate this stuff now through the data from user-entered data as well as activity-based data. So, I mean, they definitely both have their uses.
Okay, thank you. Any other feedback on this one? All right, we got a motion and a second. We do hands here, and we're going to need you to hold them up long enough for us to get a rough count. And if we looks like it's close, we might need to circle back and really count. So all those in favor of adding both the timestamp and the date field, please go ahead and raise your hand. Somewhere in the 40 plus range. All right. And let's go ahead and drop those hands, and all those against, please raise your hand up high. We got 2, 3, 4. All right, and I got 4 against. So motion passes. Okay, the water heater field proposal. We won't be voting on this today, but you do need to take a good look at this one. So this is just a heads up that this has got things coming out of appliances. It's definitely got an impact to it. But we've gotten a good amount of feedback from those who have water heater fields. And today, we won't be discussing whether or not we're doing it, because that was voted in last month. So we decided we were going to move forward. So now the work is in progress. It just hasn't been out there long enough to give everybody a fair shake. And when you got something with a high level of impact, it's always fine to defer unless we're really trying to get it in. This is one of those where I just wouldn't want to vote at this point. I don't think enough of us have looked at this, because it is going to probably affect every one of you, some very positively. So any questions? Here's our lookups that we have at this point. That's what the current proposal is. We've got a month to make adjustments. I think taking our vote on it at the next meeting would be a good step to keep things moving along. Good amount of discussion. There's actually the original post, which got us along to say, yeah, we're going to do the field. And then we got this newer post where you can get to the actual new list. Might be worth taking a look at both. If you just go into the dictionary page in Confluence and search for water space heater, you'll see both of them. And you can, if you haven't looked at the prior discussion, you can see just the activity. And that's like a good example, that prior one, a really good example of healthy discussion. And you'll see on the current one, maybe not enough discussion yet with regards to the list. Okay, any questions on this? Any thoughts, any feedback that you want to share? You want to try to talk everyone else out of this? You want to? Yeah. Yeah, thanks for using the mic.
I want to be heard. Well, why a water heater lookup on a water heater field? I wasn't at the meeting when that was discussed, but why would you need that as an option?
I'll only answer that if I get to play Superstition later.
No deal. I don't care that much.
Okay, I'm sorry. Why a lookup?
The field is water heater, and then there's a lookup water heater. John, I can tell you that was one of the fields or one of the lookups in the appliances now. So it's just proposed to be moved over there. But if you don't want that in the water heater specific field, definitely we can take it out. That's exactly the kind of feedback that we're looking for. Yeah, but that's the reason why it's in appliances currently.
This might be an example of, I think we got other enumerations that do that, and this might be an example of convention that really isn't so great because it gives you the out on saying anything about the water heater. So maybe we get rid of this because we don't want people to, because a lot of people don't understand admissibility more than they don't understand extensibility. And when you go to implement, don't just throw every enumeration in your system unless you've looked at them, right? But I think striking that one out isn't a bad idea. Getting it added to the post probably would be good so everybody else could see that. Can we get somebody to volunteer to? John, he does enough for this organization. He's like at everything on the board, and that's why you get to play Superstition. Yeah. Everybody appreciates hard work. All right, so can we get somebody who'll go ahead and post that? And the whole reason to ask, I heard a voice. Was that a yes? Okay, yes, please go ahead and post strike water heater. Okay, moving right along. So, who all knows CurrentPrice? You got a field called CurrentPrice? That's not your ListPrice? Right? Yeah, I know this one's been around. Well, let me take you way back. So, synonyms were to help everyone find the field, right? They were assistive. For those of you who remember Bob Gottesman, I've been working with him for a lot of years and prior to RESO and at RESO, and Bob and I would disagree on things. And one of them was that synonyms are going to become a crime, right? I think I actually said it that way to make it kind of negative. But synonyms are explicit disallows in certification. But when we put current price in there, it was because the definition of current price was either the list price or the sold price, depending on the status. So they were synonyms. It would help you connect the dots. Well, that wasn't cleaned out when synonyms became a disallow. And we also had a suggestion mention that synonyms should have disallowed put at the top in the dictionary. I think that would be a great one to put into a post. Again, somebody wants to volunteer to do that, you see I'm trying to foster participation in it. That would be very, very welcome. But back to this topic, I think that is a good definition of an error that evolved over time. And so now is our chance to correct that. So the post has been out there, appropriate amount of time. We've got a good discussion in there, right? For those who are currently impacted, right? The only way around this is to hide your current price. And sometimes you might want to share that price field that's automatically updated, right, by your system. That's what the current price does, right? So what we would need to do to fix this is to get rid of current price as a synonym, which I'd be interested in anybody who thinks it is a synonym to come forward and talk. And we might as well talk about adding current price as a field. But the main pain point is get current price to where at least it's extensible and can be a local field. But I'd be willing to entertain a motion for adding current price as a field, which would automatically say we have to remove it as a synonym. That is a policy. Can't have a synonym and a field be the same name. But we would just go ahead and be explicit and say, let's remove the synonym and add the field. Does anybody have an appetite for that? Yeah. Yes, we got a motion from Al. Do we have a second? And we got a second from Yvonne. All right, discussion. Mark.
Yeah, just a quick question. Is there a dictionary that says original price?
Yes.
That would be the only.
And that's the one that just whatever was in there first stays there forever. And I think it's original list price specifically. All right, any discussion?
Bob, how would he handle range pricing?
Range price, I think we've got like, there was, this might be a local thing.
I know, but right now we use list price and then list price low, right? So there's two separate fields. If now you're going to have current price, is there a current price low? I don't know, it's just to see.
Right, I'm speaking from an implementation that I did, and I want to be careful not to confuse it with the dictionary because I did a long time ago, where we had list price and list price low, I think were the two. We decided that one definitively was going to be the top versus the bottom number, which with value range pricing was the name of it. It was definitely popular, came out of Southern California, San Diego area, and blossomed. And I think the interesting about that is it depends on where the market is, whether it's going to wind up being kind of the high or low. But we would need to tackle that as a separate topic. I'm not certain that we don't have it in there. I'd have to look. So if you want to do a post, have a peek, do a search for it, and if it's not there, then get us a post and we'll dive right into it at the next meeting. Any other discussion? Come on up. You can pull it down. There you go.
I think putting current price in, particularly if the definition is going to be list price or close price.
Yeah, the definition of closed price is it's either the list price or the sold price depending on the status. So when the listing is closed, then it's the closed price. Now that is implementation. You could do other things with your closed price, but that's what I've seen.
Right, to me, it just seems very redundant for all the prices we already have.
Okay. Thank you. Any other input?
So I'm going to sort of say that too, Rob. Like if we have a low and a high and we have these different list prices, maybe this needs a little more analysis about what a current price would have to do to meet those other things.
I don't think we're going to find another definition out there other than maybe somebody has a list price calling it. I think we've looked at it pretty good. I wouldn't defer this one for that reason. Yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm just struggling with how it's not a synonym because if we have original list price, that's the original price, and so the list price would be the current price. So why do we need a current price field? Because how likely is it that
Don't
list price and
implement.
current price will be the same?
Don't implement, and I'll give you the answer.
Okay.
But don't implement. The reason why is because you want to keep whatever the last list price was, and you want to have a single field that somebody just automatically gets the sold price. So you just have a single field. It's an implementation use case, right? But don't implement it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have got a good amount of use of this field out there. There's no question about that. We meet the 2 implementation requirement quite easily. But don't implement if you don't need it. Yes?
So we've been using current price forever, just for, like in addition to list price, close price, original list price, and there's one more that's slipping my mind. It is, from a data producer standpoint, current price is fantastically convenient because it's a field that's basically standing in for a let statement, so that every single time we need to run something that has an analysis on closed properties and any other status, we don't have to constantly say, okay, let price equal closed price, and so on and so forth to have special code. We could just say run it on the field. Like the data is just there. It provides for really easy comparison across multiple statuses when you already know the price associated with that status is going to be different. It's not like mission critical, and for something like if you are in an area that's using price ranges, I would say don't, because you can just sidestep the issue if you've already got 2.
Range pricing is a whole nother topic. And
Yeah, I was like, it's a separate thing to what this is doing. Like
Yeah.
they don't link. But in this particular scenario, just having something to strike a balance between the 2 is
Right. And
Just
if
super
I can,
convenient.
I'd like to add, you can use it on displays to just show whatever that price is and not even have a label on it because you know by the status. I've seen that. You can use it for searching. That's kind of along the analytic lines. I had the field as long as I could remember, in the initial systems that I grew up on. So I think, implementation is pretty safe on that. I am kind of getting short on time, so I need to make sure we don't have any other comments. Meg?
Yeah, for me, again, I think this creates some more confusion. If current price could be used as a list price or a closed price from a data consumer's perspective, how are they supposed to know which one it's intended to be? And it seems to add, I think of RESO standards to simplify data moving around and make things easier for vendors to consume data. And this feels to me like it's adding a layer of complication and adding this field where we already have distinct fields for distinct purposes with list price and closed price. So I would not be in favor of a current price.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, let's get on to a vote. So right now we got on the vote both the removal of the synonym and the addition of the field. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, let's see here. 7, 8, 16, I'm like in a 30. Okay. All right, hands down. All those against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 against. You got 16? 17. Okay. 30 to 17. So the ayes have it. All right. This one is, thank you to David over at FMLS for diving in. This is a tough topic. And if you got water, you're going to care. The epiphany about water came to me when my largest lake in my state could care less, and one of the smaller lakes was psychotic about it. And then I was sitting down with, some of you will remember Ed Newman, he's doing fine. But I learned a little bit about the land of lakes up in Minnesota, and When he started telling me about tracking sediment on the bottom of the lake, I was bewildered. And there's a good reason for it, believe it or not. I'll refer you to Ed or somebody else in the know. So a lot of focus and attention needs to go on this. A lot of things moving from existing fields, right? When you talk to people who have water, this simple waterfront features, it's like, well, okay, is it really on the waterfront? People say waterfront when it's up the hill, when it's a view was the last comment I heard, right? Having a bit more definition is clearly needed along those lines, but you also want to make sure you're representing your impact. But think about those and think about how can you make this work for you? How can you use omissibility if you don't have water, right? Maybe you've got water and it's a minor thing. How would that fit? How would that convert if you're not going to be native, right? Those are the things to pay attention in here. And I give you that sort of depth because I think this is very much needed. I think we need to address this, right? If we're going to adopt convention that's going to work everywhere, we need to make sure we figure out how it'll work for us where it doesn't matter so much, right? Or where you got a lake where nobody cares. So this is posted. It's actually been worked on. We're going to have individual subgroup meetings. So watch for postings and keep an eye on this one. Okay, any questions around it? I don't want to get into a discussion. This thing can turn into a 1 hour. Okay. Next subgroup meeting is on the 3rd? 30th, thank you.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I didn't even know there was a first subgroup meeting, second, like it just moved right past me. So can just anybody join? Like,
Yeah.
sign up, email anybody, like.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're not seeing it, you can look for the post, but you can always email DD, and we'll make sure you're on the list. All right. Okay. All right, let's see here. So we're going to switch over to each of the main subgroup initiatives that we have on the roadmap. We want to get the subgroup chairs up here. We've got one in the building, and we've got two who couldn't make it. So Jason's going to do some fill-in and get up on those, and then I'll be right back up in a few to wrap things up. Okay? And there you go.
Thanks, Rob. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Taylor. I'm the chair of the rentals subgroup. While I have the opportunity, let me give a special shout out to Rob and also Jason from RESO. They've been instrumental in everything we've been doing in the rental subgroup. So thank you guys, greatly appreciated. Yes, clap, clap. So really two things of focus right now. First of all, the group itself, we're focused on residential rental. So in the RESO vernacular, the residential lease or RLSE category. So that's what we're all about. And then in terms of what we're doing right now, I just want to give you a very brief update about what the work group's up to, and I'll preview a couple of the recommendations that we have coming down the pipe. First of all, whoops. Unfortunately, if you present rentals, you always have to start with this slide. And this is like, wake up, rentals actually matter, everyone. So in the spirit of keeping things brief, a third of the US rents. And if you are an MLS or a brokerage in a suburban or urban market, that number is probably like 40, 50, maybe 60%. So if you're in the business of helping someone find a home, if you're in the business of helping people understand the property market, hopefully you are thinking about rentals. I work for a company called Rental Beast. We do an annual survey, and I'm seeing a lot of great light at the end of the tunnel. For the last couple of years, when we ask the MLS management, the MLS members, what are the top priorities for the year, we are now seeing rentals be kind of the top 1 or 2 spots in those results. So that's very encouraging for me. Anyway, when something's important in the world of real estate, you want to have great data around it. So that's what we're up to. Our focus is, again, the residential lease. And what we're doing, I think what Rob would have described as the practitioner view, we're taking a rentals first approach. Anytime you look at something done for the residential rental market, it's probably, it was done on the for sale side and it's just got to be good enough for rentals. Get over it, right? We're kind of an afterthought, but we're taking a rentals first approach to all of this. In terms of what we're focused on, so we did, I guess you could call it kind of a mini pain point session to figure out what topics were interesting to our stakeholders, and did the surveys, talked to people, and we came up with these topics. So there's about a dozen or so up here. We'll probably add some more in the spirit of everything is always changing. But these are what we set out to tackle. Over the last year, we've been working on these, and I'm really pleased to say we have maybe 1 or 2 of these left. So probably in about the next month or 2, we will be shipping over a batch of recommendations to Rob and the Data Dictionary group. So we're in the home stretch for our group. And again, we've covered some pretty substantial topics, right? Like these are all core things. You're talking about the price, lease terms, things like this. Like this is center and central to pretty much any rental listing. What we found, generally speaking, if we kind of look back, is the Data Dictionary did a pretty good job of getting us started, but it came up a little short of what you would need if you were focused on rentals. So again, this idea of, hey, we did it on the for sale side, it's got to be good enough for rentals. A lot of what we were doing is kind of polishing what already exists. Probably only, I don't know, 10 or 20% of what we came up with I would consider greenfield. Also, I think very interesting, and I wish I had the foresight to take credit for this, but a lot of what we've done is around the fees associated with rentals. So there are fees when you're moving in. There are fees besides rent that are paid on an ongoing basis. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with what's happening with the NAR lawsuits. In the world of rentals, there is an incredibly high-level push, like White House down, to make things more transparent for rentals, to help someone fully understand what we're going to pay as a renter. And I think we're well positioned for that with the work we've done. So that's a happy coincidence. Just to give you a couple examples of what will be headed to the Data Dictionary group, rent frequency. If you sell a house for $200,000, you understand what that means. If I tell you something's for rent for $6,000, is that for the year? Is that for the month? If you're in Miami, is that for the week? So yeah, you can figure it out on a one-off basis, but if you're trying to do this at any level of scale, it's very helpful to know what this payment is for, right? What period of time. So there's some things like that where it was close, but not quite right for rentals. A lot of stuff, again, around the fees, things like this. Pets. If you own a house, your pet policy is what you want it to be, oftentimes, unless you have a 6-year-old. If you're renting, it's so much more nuanced, and it's one of the core things that people care about. I mean, there are conventions giving away dogs for door prizes. So people care about this stuff, right? So that one was one we went pretty deep on. I think a lot of good stuff. In terms of the lookups, same idea. There was some greenfield, some brand new stuff that will be pushed over to the Data Dictionary. And there was a lot of cleanup. The Data Dictionary already talks about who's paying the fees. Is it the owner or the renter? And just an easy one, those two lists were not the same. So the suggestion in that case is let's just make these lists the same, right? So there's some things like that, and then there's some brand new things as well. So that's a little preview, a brief preview of what we've been up to, where we are. Again, we have covered, with I think one exception, all of the main items we set to review. We'll be shipping all of that stuff to the Data Dictionary as a batch, probably in about the next month or two. If you want to join, we typically will meet on the last Thursday of a month. You can pull me aside if you see me. I'm happy to catch you up with more info or get you involved. We're on Confluence. And then, of course, you can email dd@reso.org. That's the update. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so in addition to rental, there's a couple more subgroups. Looks like I have 32 seconds here. We have building. This came about basically for vertical residential housing. Not necessarily vertical residential, but say buildings where there's individual units in them and they may have amenities, other shared descriptions. There isn't really a way in Data Dictionary to do that currently, except on like an individual unit basis. That's kind of the idea behind this work group. Their goal is to create an actual resource for the building to describe building amenities, features, dog parks, stuff like that. Some of the benefits is reusability. Some of these are getting a little bit into implementation details, but that gives you the idea. Instead of having to enter building information 10 times if you have 10 rental units within a building. The building stuff will be pre-filled in, for example. So that's the idea there. They've gotten to the point where they've recommended fields. They will be voted on soon. We kind of took the same procedure that we normally do, collected a bunch of metadata, aligned it, had the group review it and discuss it, and so once the group votes on that, it will be sent to the main data dictionary work group, as Josh was just saying, the rental data elements will be. So yeah, got a little bit ahead of myself there on the slide. So that's kind of the update on the progress with that group. And the other one we have is commercial real estate, or CRE. That one is a little bit different in that the goal of that one is to create a new property type. There are two commercial property types in the data dictionary now. There's a commercial lease, commercial sale, but they're sort of quote unquote resi-mercial. This is designed to be more completely commercial focused. And also same process. We collected a bunch of metadata from commercial systems, aligned it, see what we had in common, proposed that. The group actually went through and line by line for each field and decide if they should keep it or omit it. So it wouldn't be a resource. It would be, like if you look at the dictionary now on fields, you'll see that there's a reference, it'll say like residential lease or residential or multifamily. This would be one of those that would be attached to existing fields. There would also be some new fields and lookups that have been proposed as a part of this, but much of it will be like sort of a tag to existing data elements. So that's the progress, and so far they have decided their set of fields. Nothing's been sent to the main dictionary group yet, but the next step is to define the high priority lookups. They're particularly concentrating on property subtype, so collecting a lot of that metadata, again, seeing what's in common use for commercial use cases, and what do we need to add to the dictionary to fulfill that. And yeah, that's kind of it at this point. We're looking at defining lookups that are specific to that use case, and then go from there. And again, anything from that group that's voted on will be sent to main dictionary for final approval. So that's the subgroup update.
All right, everybody. I think we're pretty much in a wrap. So there you got your info, especially when it comes to access. Make sure you use that. DD at the same domain. And if you want to discuss after the meeting here, we're going on break right now for 15, I think it's a 15-minute break, but we'll be hanging around if you want to have any discussion. That's why I ran out and got my coffee, because I figured I might be detained. So feel free to come on up. Thank you.